Jasmine Williams never knew what it felt like to be seen for who she really was. At 22 years old, she had spent her entire life being introduced as the daughter of that famous singer Robert Williams. People would light up when they heard her last name, expecting to see some version of her father's talent shining through her. But Jasmine always felt like she disappointed them. Growing up in a massive house with tall gates and security cameras wasn't as magical as people thought. While other kids played in their front yards, Jasmine watched the world through tinted car windows. Her father's music played in grocery stores, on the radio, and at every family gathering. Everyone knew his songs by heart, but hardly anyone knew Jasmine's middle name. Robert Williams was the kind of father who meant well but never quite understood how to connect with his children. He worked late nights in his home studio, traveled for months at a time, and when he was home, he was usually on the phone with managers, producers, or other musicians. Jasmine learned early that the music always came first. When Jasmine was 7, she found an old guitar in the basement. She would sneak down there after school and try to copy the songs she heard on the radio. Her small fingers struggled with the strings, but something about making music felt right. It felt like breathing. She practiced in secret for months, learning simple melodies and making up her own little songs about her pet cat and her favorite books. One day, her father caught her playing. Jasmine expected him to be proud, maybe even impressed. Instead, he sat down heavily and watched her with a sad expression. After she finished her song, he gently took the guitar from her hands. "Music is a hard life, sweetheart," he said quietly. "It takes a special kind of talent to make it work. Maybe you should focus on your schoolwork instead." Those words stuck with Jasmine like glue. She was only 7, but she understood what he meant. She wasn't special enough. She wasn't talented enough. She should stick to normal things that normal people did. Through middle school and high school, Jasmine threw herself into everything except music. She joined the debate team, played soccer, volunteered at animal shelters, and got excellent grades. Her teachers loved her. Her friends thought she was smart and funny. But at home, she still felt invisible. Family dinners were the worst. Robert would talk about his upcoming tours, his new album ideas, or the famous musicians he was working with. Jasmine's mother, Linda, would share updates about her charity work and social events. Jasmine would sit there, eating quietly, waiting for someone to ask about her day or her dreams. Usually nobody did. The few times she tried to join the conversation, her contributions felt small. When she mentioned getting an A on her history test, her father would nod politely and then launch into a story about performing at a historic venue. When she talked about helping at the animal shelter, her mother would smile and immediately start discussing the fancy fundraiser she was organizing. Jasmine learned to stay quiet. She learned that her achievements, while perfectly fine, weren't the kind that made people's eyes light up. She wasn't saving the world or entertaining millions of people. She was just regular. After high school, Jasmine moved out to attend college across town. She studied business, thinking it was practical and safe. Her parents paid for everything without question, but she could tell they weren't particularly excited about her choices. When her friends talked about their parents bragging about their kids, Jasmine couldn't relate. Her parents supported her, but they never seemed impressed by anything she did. College was better in some ways. Nobody knew who her father was unless, she told them, she could just be Jasmine, not Robert Williams' daughter. She made friends who liked her for her sense of humor and her willingness to help others. She even dated a few people who didn't know about her famous family until weeks into their relationships. But even with this freedom, Jasmine felt like something was missing. Late at night in her dorm room, she would sometimes hum songs under her breath. She'd catch herself tapping out rhythms on her desk or imagining melodies while she walked across campus. The music was still there, buried deep inside her, but she had learned to keep it locked away. After graduation, Jasmine found a job at a small organization that helped kids in foster care. The work was meaningful, and she was good at it. She organized events, managed social media accounts, and helped connect children with families who wanted to adopt them. Her coworkers respected her, and she felt like she was making a real difference in the world. But family gatherings remained difficult. Every holiday, every birthday party, every casual dinner somehow became about her father's career. Relatives would ask when she was going to follow in his footsteps, as if becoming a famous singer was something you could just decide to do one Tuesday afternoon. She would laugh it off and change the subject, but inside, those old feelings of not being enough would creep back in. Her father never directly discouraged her anymore, but he never encouraged her either. When she mentioned enjoying the music at church or humming along to songs on the radio, he would smile politely and talk about something else. It was clear that in his mind, she had chosen a different path, and music wasn't part of it. Jasmine convinced herself she was happy with her choice. She had a steady job, a nice apartment, and good friends. She was helping people and living a stable, predictable life. This was what most people wanted, right? This was enough. But sometimes, when she was driving alone with the radio on, she would find herself singing along with more passion than she meant to. Her voice would soar with the melody, hitting notes she didn't know she could reach, expressing emotions she kept buried most of the time. In those moments, she felt truly alive. Then the song would end, and she would remember who she was supposed to be: the practical daughter, the responsible employee, the girl who had chosen safety over dreams. Jasmine had built a life that looked good from the outside. She was financially stable, socially active, and professionally successful in her own small way. But deep down, she carried the weight of a dream she had never been allowed to pursue. She carried the voice of a 7-year-old girl who just wanted her father to be proud of her music. As her father's 60th birthday approached, that buried part of herself would finally get a chance to surface. But Jasmine had no idea that the biggest night of her life was coming, or that it would begin with people trying to make her the punchline of a cruel joke. She had spent 15 years believing she wasn't talented enough to follow her father's path. She was about to discover just how wrong everyone had been about her abilities, including herself. But first, she would have to survive the most humiliating setup of her life, planned by people who thought her dreams were nothing more than entertainment for others. The stage was set for everything to change, but Jasmine Williams was still living in the shadow, convinced that shadows were where she belonged. The invitation arrived on expensive paper with gold lettering. Jasmine held it in her hands, reading it 3 times before the words really sank in. Her father's management team was throwing him a surprise 60th birthday party at one of the most famous music venues in the country, the kind of place where legends performed and careers were made. Jasmine almost threw the invitation away. These industry events were always the same for her. She would sit in the corner, smile politely, when people asked how she was doing, and listen to everyone talk about how amazing her father was. By the end of the night, she usually felt smaller than when she arrived, but this was his 60th birthday. A milestone. Her mother called 3 times to make sure she was coming, reminding her how much it would mean to her father. Jasmine finally agreed. Though her stomach twisted with anxiety every time she thought about it, she spent hours trying to figure out what to wear. Too fancy, and she would look like she was trying too hard. Too casual, and people would whisper about how she didn't respect the occasion. She finally settled on a simple black dress that made her blend into the background, which was exactly what she wanted. The venue was even more intimidating than she had imagined. Photographers lined the entrance, taking pictures of every famous person who walked through the doors. Jasmine slipped past them quickly, hoping nobody would recognize her. Inside, the place buzzed with energy. Musicians, producers, record label executives, and celebrities filled every corner. The air smelled like expensive perfume and champagne. Jasmine found her seat in the VIP section, right up front where her family always sat. Her mother kissed her cheek and immediately started pointing out famous people in the crowd. Her father was surrounded by a group of industry friends laughing loudly at someone's story. He looked happier than Jasmine had seen him in years. The show began with a parade of incredible performances. One after another, famous singers took the stage to perform her father's biggest hits. Each version was different, but they were all amazing. The crowd cheered after every song, and Jasmine watched her father's face glow with pride. She felt the familiar mix of emotions she always experienced at these events. Pride in her father's success, but also a deep loneliness. She was surrounded by hundreds of people celebrating the man she called Dad, but she felt like an outsider looking in through a window. During the intermission, 3 men approached her, table with big smiles on their faces. Jasmine recognized them as her father's longtime friends from the business. Tony was a music producer who had worked with her father for over 20 years. Rick ran a major record label and had helped launch her father's career. Danny was a songwriter who had written some of her father's biggest hits. "Jasmine, look at you all grown up and beautiful," Tony said, giving her a hug that lasted a little too long. She could smell alcohol on his breath. "We've been talking," Rick said, sliding into the chair next to her. "And we want to do something really special for your dad tonight." Danny leaned in closer, his words slightly slurred. "We think it would be amazing if you got up there and sang happy birthday to him. You know, a sweet father-daughter moment." Jasmine's heart immediately started racing. "Oh, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm not really a performer." "Come on." Tony laughed. "It's just happy birthday. Anyone can sing happy birthday." What Jasmine didn't know was that these 3 men had been drinking heavily in the back room, sharing stories and gossip about the music industry. The conversation had somehow turned to her father's family, and someone had mentioned how Robert always said his daughter couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. "Remember when Robert told us about that time she tried to sing at Christmas dinner?" Rick had laughed, taking another drink. "He said it was so bad, even the dog left the room." The idea started as a joke between drunk friends. Wouldn't it be funny to get Robert's tone-deaf daughter up on stage? They could all have a good laugh watching her struggle through a simple song. It seemed harmless to them. Just a bit of entertainment among friends who had heard Robert dismiss his daughter's musical abilities countless times over the years. But sitting next to Jasmine now, they presented it as a loving tribute. "Your father would be so touched," Danny said, putting his hand on her shoulder. "Imagine how special it would be for him to have his daughter honor him on his big night." Jasmine felt trapped. How could she say no without seeming selfish or ungrateful? These were her father's closest friends, people who had known her since she was a child. If they thought this was a good idea, maybe it was. "I really don't think I should," she said quietly. "I'm not good at singing in front of people." "That makes it even more special," Rick insisted. "It shows how much you love him, that you're willing to step out of your comfort zone." Tony flagged down a server and ordered another round of drinks. "Look, sweetheart, we've already talked to the sound guy. Everything is set up. All you have to do is walk up there when we call your name and sing. 2 minutes and you'll make your father the happiest man in the world." The 3 men exchanged glances that Jasmine didn't catch. They were trying not to smile too widely, already imagining the awkward moment they were setting up. In their alcohol-clouded minds, this seemed like harmless fun. They had no idea how deeply their joke would affect someone who had spent her whole life feeling inadequate. "What if I mess up?" Jasmine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You won't mess up," Danny said, though his tone suggested he hoped she would. "And even if you do, everyone will think it's sweet. Nobody expects you to sound like Whitney Houston." The lights dimmed, signaling that the second half of the show was about to begin. Tony stood up and straightened his jacket. "It's decided then. We'll call you up right before the big finale. Just sing happy birthday. Give your dad a hug and everyone will love it." Jasmine nodded weakly, her stomach churning with anxiety. She spent the rest of the show barely paying attention to the incredible performances happening on stage. Instead, she kept imagining herself up there, her voice cracking, people laughing, her father's embarrassed expression. She thought about making an excuse and leaving, but her purse was back at the table, and her mother kept glancing over to make sure she was okay. She felt stuck, committed to something she desperately didn't want to do. As the evening continued, Tony, Rick, and Danny kept checking on her, bringing her drinks she didn't want and reassuring her that everything would be perfect. They seemed more excited about her performance than she was, which should have been a warning sign. "Just remember," Rick whispered to her during the final musical number. "Keep it simple. Don't try to be fancy. Just sing it straight and simple." What he really meant was, please don't try too hard because we want to see you fail. But Jasmine, heard it as genuine advice from someone who cared about her father's happiness. The final performer left the stage to thunderous applause. The venue's host took the microphone and began talking about what an incredible evening it had been. Jasmine's hands were shaking. Her mouth felt dry. Her heart was beating so fast she was sure people could hear it. Then she heard Tony's voice booming through the sound system. He had somehow gotten hold of a microphone and was standing near the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, before we end this incredible celebration, we have one more very special surprise. Jasmine felt like she might throw up. This was really happening. There was no backing out now. Robert Williams has given us so much beautiful music over the years, Tony continued, his words slightly slurred, but his voice carrying clearly through the venue. And tonight we're going to hear from someone very close to his heart. Please welcome to the stage Robert's daughter, Jasmine Williams. The spotlight found her in the audience. Hundreds of faces turned to look at her. Some people clapped politely. Others whispered to their neighbors, probably wondering who she was and why she was being called up. Jasmine stood on shaky legs, her vision slightly blurry from the bright lights. She could see her father's confused expression in the front row. He clearly hadn't known this was planned. As she walked toward the stage, Tony, Rick, and Danny watched with barely contained grins. Their cruel joke was about to unfold exactly as they had planned. They had no idea that they were about to witness something that would change everyone's understanding of who Jasmine Williams really was. The walk to the stage felt like it lasted forever and happened too fast at the same time. Jasmine's legs felt like jelly, but somehow they kept moving forward. Every step brought her closer to what she was sure would be the most embarrassing moment of her life. The spotlight followed her, making everything beyond its bright circle disappear into darkness. She could hear whispers from the audience. Some people were probably wondering who she was. Others might have been asking why Robert Williams' daughter was being called to perform. Jasmine had spent her whole life trying to avoid this kind of attention. And now hundreds of the most important people in the music industry were staring at her. As she climbed the steps to the stage, her hand gripped the railing so tightly her knuckles turned white. The stage was bigger than it looked from the audience. The microphone stand seemed miles away, even though it was only a few steps in front of her. Tony appeared beside her with a huge grin on his face. He handed her the microphone like he was giving her a precious gift. "Here you go, sweetheart. Just sing from the heart." His words sounded encouraging, but there was something in his eyes that made Jasmine's stomach twist even more. She took the microphone with shaking hands. It felt heavier than she expected. The metal was cold against her palm, and she could feel the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on her shoulders. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tony announced to the crowd, "let's hear from Jasmine Williams as she sings happy birthday to her legendary father." The audience clapped politely. Jasmine looked out at the sea of faces and immediately found her father in the front row. He looked confused and worried. Her mother was smiling, but Jasmine could see the concern in her eyes too. Neither of her parents had known this was going to happen. Behind them, Tony, Rick, and Danny had returned to their seats. They were trying to look supportive, but Jasmine caught them exchanging glances and barely contained smiles. Something about their expressions made her feel even more nervous. The venue fell quiet. Everyone was waiting for her to begin. Jasmine opened her mouth to start singing Happy Birthday, but no sound came out. Her throat felt completely dry. She tried to swallow, but there was nothing there. "Take your time, honey," someone called, out from the audience. The encouragement was meant to be kind, but it only made Jasmine feel more pressure. She closed her eyes and tried to calm down. This was just Happy Birthday. Every person in the room had sung it hundreds of times. It was the simplest song in the world. She could do this. But as she stood there in the silence, something strange began to happen. Instead of Happy Birthday, a different melody started playing in her head. It was one of her father's songs, one she had listened to countless times growing up. Dreams Don't Die was the song that had made him famous, the one that played on the radio when she was learning to drive, the one that made her cry when she was feeling lonely. The song was about never giving up on the things that matter most to you, even when everyone tells you to quit. It was about finding the courage to be who you really are, even when it's scary. Jasmine had never planned to sing this song. She had never planned to sing anything except Happy Birthday. But standing there on that stage, with her father's worried eyes looking up at her, something inside her shifted. She thought about the 7-year-old girl who used to play guitar in the basement. She thought about all the times she had sung along to the radio when no one was listening. She thought about the dreams she had buried so deep she had almost forgotten they existed. Without really deciding to do it, Jasmine began to sing the opening, lines of Dreams Don't Die. Her voice started quietly, almost like a whisper. But even those first soft notes carried something special. The audience, who had been shifting in their seats and checking their phones, suddenly went completely still. Jasmine's voice grew stronger with each word. She wasn't trying to copy her father's version of the song. She wasn't trying to impress anyone or prove anything. She was just singing the way the song felt to her, the way it had always sounded in her heart. The melody poured out of her like water that had been held back by a dam for too long. Her voice had a richness and depth that surprised everyone in the room, but most of all, it surprised her. This didn't sound like the weak, uncertain voice she remembered from childhood. This sounded like something real and powerful and completely her own. As she sang the chorus, Jasmine's confidence began to build. She could feel the audience's attention in a way she had never experienced before. They weren't just listening politely anymore. They were truly hearing her. The song was about holding on to hope when everything seems impossible. As Jasmine sang those words, she realized she was singing about her own life. All those years of believing she wasn't good enough. All those times she had pushed her musical dreams aside. All those moments when she had felt invisible in her own family. Her voice soared on the high notes, reaching places she didn't know she could go. The emotion in her singing was raw and honest in a way that even professional performers sometimes struggle to achieve. She wasn't performing the song, she was living it. In the audience, people were starting to lean forward in their seats. Conversations had stopped completely. Even the servers moving around the room had paused to listen. Her father's expression had changed from confusion to something else entirely. His mouth was slightly open and there were tears starting to form in his eyes. This was his daughter, the girl he had dismissed as untalented, singing his most personal song with more emotion and authenticity than he had ever heard before. Tony, Rick, and Danny were no longer smiling. Their cruel joke had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Instead of embarrassing herself, Jasmine was giving the performance of the evening. The three men looked uncomfortable now, realizing that their plan to humiliate her had revealed their own poor judgment. As Jasmine reached the bridge of the song, her voice took on an even deeper quality. She was singing about dreams that refuse to die, about talents that can't be buried no matter how hard people try to ignore them. Every word seemed to be coming directly from her soul. The venue's acoustics were perfect, carrying her voice to every corner of the room. People in the balcony were leaning over the railings to get a better look at this unknown singer, who was captivating everyone present. Some audience members were pulling out their phones to record what was happening. They could sense that they were witnessing something special, something that would be talked about for years to come. Jasmine's mother had tears streaming down her face. She was watching her daughter transform before her eyes from a quiet, uncertain young woman into a confident, powerful artist. All those years of wondering why Jasmine seemed so unhappy, and now she understood. Her daughter had been carrying this incredible gift inside her, with no one to recognize it or encourage it. As the song built toward its climax, Jasmine's voice filled every inch of the historic venue. She hit notes that seemed impossible, conveying emotions that reached into the hearts of everyone listening. This wasn't just singing. This was storytelling, healing, and revelation all wrapped into one incredible performance. The final notes of the song hung in the air for what felt like an eternity. The venue was completely silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Everyone was processing what they had just witnessed. Then, like thunder after lightning, the applause began. It started with one person clapping, then another. Then suddenly, the entire room was on their feet, cheering and applauding with an intensity that shook the building. But the most important reaction was happening in the front row. Robert Williams was standing, tears flowing freely down his face, clapping harder than anyone else in the room. For the first time in her life, Jasmine saw pure pride and amazement in her father's eyes. Not pride in his own accomplishments, but pride in hers. As the applause continued, Jasmine stood on that stage and felt something she had never experienced before. She felt seen. She felt heard. She felt like herself, completely and unapologetically. The cruel joke that was supposed to humiliate her had instead become the moment that changed everything. The three men who had planned her embarrassment were now witnessing the birth of a star. And Jasmine Williams, who had spent 22 years believing she wasn't talented enough to follow her dreams, was finally ready to step out of her father's shadow and into her own light. The applause seemed to go on forever. Jasmine stood on the stage, still holding the microphone, trying to process what had just happened. Her legs felt weak, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from the overwhelming rush of emotions flowing through her body. She had never felt anything like this before. People were standing, clapping, and some were even cheering her name. But the most important thing she saw was her father. Robert Williams was crying, something she had never seen him do before. He was clapping so hard his hands must have hurt, and his face showed pure amazement and pride. As the applause finally began to quiet down, Jasmine's father climbed onto the stage. He walked toward her slowly, as if he couldn't quite believe what he had just witnessed. When he reached her, he pulled her into the tightest hug she had ever received from him. "I'm so sorry," he whispered in her ear, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry I never saw this. I'm so sorry I never believed in you." Jasmine hugged him back, feeling years of hurt and disappointment start to melt away. This was the moment she had dreamed of since she was 7 years old, sitting in that basement with her guitar. Her father finally saw her talent. He finally saw her. When they separated, her father took the microphone. His voice was shaky with emotion as he spoke to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I thought I knew what talent looked like. I thought I understood music, but tonight my daughter just taught me that the most beautiful voices sometimes come from the most unexpected places." The audience erupted in applause again. Jasmine looked out at all those faces, and instead of feeling scared or small, she felt strong. She felt like she belonged on that stage. But not everyone in the room was celebrating. Tony, Rick, and Danny sat in their seats looking uncomfortable and embarrassed. Their cruel plan had completely backfired. Instead of watching Jasmine fail, they had just witnessed her triumph. Instead of laughing at her expense, they were now the ones who looked foolish. As the evening came to an end, people began approaching Jasmine. Music producers, record label executives, and talent agents were all wanting to talk to her. They handed her business cards and asked if she had ever considered a career in music. "I've never recorded anything," she told them honestly. "Tonight was the first time I've ever sung in front of people." This seemed to amaze them even more. Here was someone with incredible natural talent who had never been trained or coached. She was a diamond in the rough, and everyone could see her potential. One woman introduced herself as Beverly Chen, a talent scout for one of the biggest record labels in the country. "Jasmine, I've been in this business for 20 years, and I've never heard anything like what you just did up there. Would you be interested in coming to our studio next week to talk about your future?" Jasmine looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. "Whatever you want to do, sweetheart. This is your moment, your choice." Over the following days, Jasmine's life changed completely. Someone had recorded her performance on their phone, and the video spread across social media like wildfire. Within 48 hours, millions of people had watched the clip of the unknown girl who stunned everyone at her father's birthday party. The comments on the video were overwhelmingly positive. People were calling her voice angelic and pure magic. Many commented that they had never heard such raw emotion in a performance. The video was shared by celebrities, music critics, and ordinary people who were moved by what they heard. But the attention wasn't all positive. Tony, Rick, and Danny found themselves in an uncomfortable spotlight. As word spread about what had really happened that night, people began to understand that the three men had tried to humiliate Jasmine as a joke. The music industry, which thrives on relationships and reputation, did not look kindly on their behavior. Tony started losing clients who didn't want to work with someone who would try to embarrass a young woman for entertainment. Rick found himself facing questions from his company's board about his judgment and character. Danny discovered that other songwriters were reluctant to collaborate with him, seeing him as someone who couldn't be trusted. The three men tried to apologize publicly, claiming they had never meant any harm. But their apologies felt hollow and self-serving. The damage to their reputations was done, and the music industry has a long memory for this kind of behavior. Meanwhile, Jasmine was experiencing the opposite treatment. Offers poured in from record labels, producers, and managers. Everyone wanted to work with the girl who had appeared from nowhere and captivated an entire room of industry professionals. She met with Beverly Chen the following week, and the conversation changed her life. "We'd like to offer you a recording contract," Beverly said. "But I want you to know that we're not interested in making you a copy of your father or anyone else. What made that performance special was that it was uniquely you." Jasmine signed with the label, but she made one important decision. She chose to work with different producers and songwriters than her father had used. She wanted to make sure that her music was her own, not an extension of his career. Her father supported this choice completely. "You need to find your own voice, your own style," he told her. "I spent too many years not seeing your talent. I won't make the mistake of trying to control it now." The relationship between Jasmine and her father transformed completely. They began spending real time together, talking about music, life, and dreams. He shared stories about his early career struggles, and she opened up about years of feeling invisible and inadequate. "I always thought you weren't interested in music," he admitted during one of their conversations. "I see now that I never gave you the chance to show me what you could do." Jasmine's first single was released 6 months after that life-changing night. The song was called "Finally Free," and it was clearly inspired by her own journey of self-discovery. The lyrics talked about breaking out of boxes that other people put you in and finding the courage to be yourself. The song shot to the top of the charts within weeks. Radio stations couldn't stop playing it, and streaming numbers broke records. But more importantly, the song resonated with people who had their own stories of feeling underestimated or overlooked. Jasmine received thousands of messages from people saying that her song had inspired them to pursue their own dreams. Young women wrote to thank her for showing them that it's never too late to discover your talents. Parents shared how her story had made them look at their own children differently, wondering what hidden gifts they might be missing. Her success didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't always easy. Learning to navigate the music industry, dealing with the pressure of sudden fame, and managing her career while staying true to herself required constant effort. But Jasmine had something that many artists struggle to find: authenticity. Every song she recorded, every performance she gave, carried the same emotional honesty that had captivated that room on her father's birthday. She wasn't trying to be someone else or follow a formula for success. She was simply sharing her truth through music. A year after her debut performance, Jasmine was nominated for several music awards. When she won her first major award for Best New Artist, her acceptance speech brought many people to tears. "A year ago, I thought I wasn't good enough to pursue music," she said, holding the award in her trembling hands. "I let other people's opinions become my reality. But sometimes life puts you exactly where you need to be, even when it feels scary. To everyone who feels like their dreams are too big or their talents aren't enough, I want you to know that your voice matters. The world needs what only you can give." In the audience that night, her parents watched with pride and amazement. Her father had learned to see his daughter not as a reflection of himself, but as the unique, talented individual she had always been. Tony, Rick, and Danny watched the awards show from their respective homes, each dealing with the consequences of their actions in different ways. Their attempt to humiliate someone for their own entertainment had not only failed spectacularly, but it also revealed their own character flaws to the entire industry. Jasmine Williams had gone from being the forgotten daughter of a famous singer to being a rising star in her own right. But more importantly, she had discovered who she really was beneath years of self-doubt and other people's expectations. The cruel joke that was meant to embarrass her had become the catalyst for the most beautiful transformation. Sometimes the moments that seem designed to break us actually set us free. For Jasmine, that stage had been both her greatest fear and her greatest opportunity, and she had found the courage to embrace both.